is Christian Wallowing Bull. I am a Northern Arapaho tribal member, and I do music for a living. It's taking me a long journey to be able to get where I am today. I'm on my last flight home, and my world's asleep. Well, if you see my folks, say hello for me. Do you know my Indian name? Let it strike a fear in their hearts. Warrior blood, it flows through my veins. Do you know my Indian name? I was born and raised on a Native American reservation. My mother and father both were drug addicts and alcoholics for a lot of their years, and it would eventually take both of their lives. And so I was actually placed into foster care at 18 months old on this reservation in Montana. This foster family housed, within the years that I was there, I was there till about 18 years old. These foster parents fostered about 200 kids, including me. So I was raised in a house really of chaos on this reservation. And the town that it was in was a really, there's a lot of darkness, there's a lot of rough things that went on there. Growing up, there's just a lot of hopelessness, I would say, a lot of drug abuse, a lot of alcoholism, a lot of neglect, and things that it just was very normal for this small town on this reservation. There were a lot of kids that would come through the home, you know, maybe a couple months at a time, maybe a couple years at a time, but I was there from 18 months old to 18 years old, and so I saw a lot of movement. The foster care system in general is tough to grow up in, not knowing your blood parents, not being around them. You question all the time and you wonder where they're at. About 15 years old, I had a couple siblings living within that foster home with me who played the acoustic guitar. I woke up one morning and had this want to play the guitar. And I walked over to my sister and I said, "Hey, can you teach me a few chords? I want to play this guitar." And she taught me a few very basic chords. And for about 3 years, I took that guitar and I played that guitar for 3 years straight. I mean, every day. I did not know how to put it down. And that became my greatest passion. It was something that awoke within me, is that I had this guitar, I didn't know how to sing, I had no one to teach me how to sing. I just started to speak out, I started to project, I started to sing. The earth is longing for your sons and your daughters, but when they awaken, and I hear their weeping, that all their sorrow, their hearts are breaking. I was on the reservation till I was about 18 years old, and I was getting in trouble And I was becoming part of that dark system. I was giving myself to hopelessness and started to drink and started to follow in the footsteps of my family. I started to give in, I started to give up, and I started to party, and I started to give away to distraction. I had some connections to some people, some friends in Alaska, and my foster mother said, "Why don't you go to Alaska?" So I hitchhiked from Montana all the way to Alaska with the money that I had in my pocket. It was up in Alaska that I started to play at open mics. And at that time, I didn't know open mics are a thing, because one thing about the reservation is open mics don't exist. Opportunities for music don't really exist. There isn't a nice little coffee shop. There isn't a little music venue. It's like my people are struggling just to survive, just to get to the store, to get some food for their babies. It's like nobody's thinking about the industry life. That wasn't even on my radar until I left the reservation, you know? Even though I left the reservation to get away from the hard, addictive lifestyle, I began to continue to drink. I thought it was a time that at 21 years old, I thought I was having fun, but I didn't realize that I was also kind of just being swept under this bad current, just like my mom and dad. Because just because I left the reservation, the darkness didn't leave me. I carried some of those things with me. Though I had had a new way, off the reservation, I still would go on to struggle through many years of addiction and loss in my own life and in my own heart, processing through traumas that I had grown up in, Some of my earliest memories, I don't even fully know how old I was, but I was a really young boy. Every single night, I had the same nightmare where I'm walking through a forest in the wintertime, and I find both of my mom and dad, and they're dead. They're lying face down, and there's blood everywhere. This was a nightmare that I struggled through for many years when I was a boy. And when I was a little boy, I didn't understand why I had that nightmare. It wasn't until I got older that I was able to process more so of like those beginnings. I really was witnessing their timeline, their life. I was being affected. Even though I was separated from my mom and dad, I still carried their blood, and I was feeling the weight of what they were going through. And not just what my mom and dad go through, but what Native Americans have been going through for a long time. There is a common theme when it comes to Native American reservations. There is death, there is grief, there is loss. There's no opportunity, there are no resources. And we are sent there originally to die off. But Native people are some of the strongest people that I know, the most resilient people that I know. And I believe in my heart that it is people with stories who understand that grief but overcome, that will be people who can bring peace to generations, people who can bring wisdom to maybe people who don't understand what it is to go through trials like that. So that journey took me a long time, from being that young boy, having nightmares of my parents being gone, being murdered, having those visions when I was a little boy. I did not understand them, and I didn't realize that, my parents were victims of the reservation, really. Victims of that darkness, that dark system. As I got older, even though I was separated from them, I was about to become victim of that same system. And it was 7 years that I spent drinking my life away. I spent a lot of time in treatment centers. I spent a lot of time in jail. But one thing that I knew throughout many of those years was that I wanted to live. Along the way, though there were a lot of hardship, there were also points of light and good things that came to me that would remind me of a better way. One of the highest points of my addiction, some of my darkest times and days for sure, a person walked up to me and handed me this beautiful acoustic electric guitar. And they said, "This is your purpose. God told me to give this to you." And I took that guitar that day, and it was crazy because I was still hungover. I was still struggling. I was still in a dark place. But this person perceived and had this gift for me and handed it to me. And from that day forward, I mean, that guitar has remained with me for many years. And even though I continued to struggle with addiction and with hardship, that guitar never left my side. I played it every day. And it's got chips, it's got some scarring on the wood. And there was a point a few years down the road that I tried to give the guitar away at some point to a friend of mine because I wanted to give up, I wanted to give in. That darkness was still kind of bearing down on me. And I said, forget it. And I was kind of in that forget it mode. And that person, that good friend of mine, brought the guitar back to me and said, "Nope, this guitar belongs to you." So it was almost as if that light was still trying to break in, even though I was trying to give in at times.
Why don't you hold my hand when the rivers run deep? I saw a butterfly fall from her broken wings. Yeah.
I ended up pretty much hitchhiking to Southern California. I would still drink in Southern California and I would still struggle. I ended up going to an institution and treatment center in the Midwest, and I would end up spending about 6-7 years in the Midwest. And it was in those spaces I would get clean and I would get sober, but then I would fall back, I would relapse, and I would get to those points of giving up, feeling like a lone wolf. That's what I had always referred to myself as, was a lone wolf. I always felt isolated within myself, just like I was when I was a boy in a home of so many other kids, a foster home. The thing that was constant in my life was that music. And that's how I connected with myself, that's how I connected with others, and eventually that's how I would learn to process a lot of the grief and emotion and time that I had spent struggling. There was always that heart within me to return to my homelands in Wyoming. It was years back when I was a teenager that my mom would go on to pass. And she was only 43 years old when she passed on. And she lived a not good life. She lived a violent and very hard and dark life. That's what she knew. That's what surrounded her. I was so separated from my family and my mom, I didn't even know where they buried her. I had no reference. And here's the thing about a Native American reservation, there's not a whole lot of resources for burial sites. So when I was back in the Midwest, when I was back east in these treatment centers, I was planning on coming home to find my mom. And I literally used satellite imaging to find my mother's gravesite. I'm talking about for miles around the Wind River Indian Reservation. And I found this spot just outside the town, Ethity. And I said, I know that's where my mom is. It was crazy because it was almost as if she was reaching out to me to be able to find her again and reconnect. So when I finally made it out here, I got to her grave, and there it was, her cross, Felicia Wallowing Bull. After all these years, when she passed away, I wasn't even able to be at her funeral because I was so separated from my family. And so when I discovered her gravesite, I also discovered that my family had their own cemetery. So that, for me, was a big point in being able to reconnect with my people, reconnect with my bloodline. You know, this is where I'm from, this is who I am. As a Northern Arapaho tribal member, even though I spent a lot of time wandering the states, I knew that I had this sacred connection with my home here in Wyoming, where my mother was originally from. And I can't even tell you how powerful and rejuvenating it was for me when I saw the Wind River Range Mountains and I knew that I was home. I am telling you, since I was separated from my mother at 18 months old, at about 27 years old, it's taken me that many years to get home, to find myself, to find my roots, find my bloodline. You know, being here is that having that sacred connection is powerful to me. During my trials, during those years being away from my homelands, I developed my love for music. I developed those stories, and I played and sang out my heart. And those songs for me were like prayers of wanting to return home. I moved to this small town, Lander, Wyoming. I started to find music friends in Lander, Wyoming, and they had told me about this competition that was happening, an annual competition, biggest one in the state. I'd never known that kind of opportunity. When this friend told me about that, they said, you need to submit an application. And so I did.
In a fit of rage, I wanted all their teeth. In another life, I might have kept my hands clean.
I was one of about 50 contestants in this Wyoming singer-songwriters competition. It was a whole weekend, about 4 days of I made it through. I believe there was about 3 rounds. I made it through each round. I sang these songs that I wrote in treatment on that stage. And they announced the winner, Christian Wallowing Bull. And it was beautiful because there was all this press from Wyoming there that day. And they interviewed me. They asked me, said, what are you gonna do with money? You know, how do you feel?
So completely honored, and I feel like I carry even the indigenous people on my shoulders. And the ancestors that have lived here before me.
I understood in that very moment when I was standing on that stage and I grabbed that microphone and I shared, this isn't just for me. And when I stand here on this stage, I sing with all of my relatives beside me. My name went out on Wyoming Public Radio. People started to hear my music. And so since 2021, I've been, playing on several different stages, several different venues. It is for me so much beyond just my enjoyment of music. For me, that music was really good medicine throughout all those years of grief and loss and trial. It was good medicine that I could cling on to. The life that I grew up in was a life of survival and fight or flight. As a Native American artist, that's very big for me. I did not know that I could do this with music. I did not know that I could, be able to bring light to my people. Whenever I perform on stage, wherever I go, I carry them with me in my heart. My family, my relatives, my people. It is so true. There are so few Native people out here doing this kind of work. And I believe it is incredibly important. I know that it's important. And so that's why I continue in the course. This is for my family. This is for my daughter, and this is for my people. If I was to visit my younger self and tell myself this is where you'll be, I don't even know if I'd be able to believe my older self because of the things I've been through. But one thing that I know is important is that throughout all of those years, there was a fire that never died in my heart. At one time, I should have been a victim to the system as well on a Native reservation. I should have been dead. I should be in prison. My life should be over. But it's not. There is a hope. There is light. And there is a better way. And if you have a dream in your heart, so I have to start over. Whatever that dream is in your heart, you can do it. And if you don't know how, you can learn. You have to remember that it isn't just for you. Carry that resilience with you. Any of you that have lost your parents, loved ones to addiction, any of you that have had to go through addiction and hopelessness, res kids on a Native American reservation who only know darkness, who only know danger, who understand only survival mode, fight or flight, there is hope. There's always hope. I know it to be true.